Start recording. All right, thank you very much for joining me. Welcome to Handmade Hero, show where we code a complete game live on stream. We are going to do a little bit of prefetching today is what we're going to be doing. Just this past week, we put all the cutscenes in for the introduction sequence for our game. And one of the things that you'll notice if you pay really close attention to them, which admittedly is pretty tough to do because video streaming on the internet's kind of low quality. Even the video on demand, like the YouTube videos, are pretty low quality. So unless you actually ran it yourself at home because you follow along with the source code, or if you watched like the videos that are shipped on the Handmade Hero, we have a Handmade Hero BitTorrent you can access on the forum site where you can get like high quality recordings. If you saw those, you definitely would have seen this. If you haven't, then it may have been hard to notice because it's so janky, it looks so sort of crappy with the video compression anyway, you can't maybe pick up on some of these problems. But there definitely was a problem, and it was a problem that I wanted to leave till the end so you could kind of see, I could explain a little bit and see how to fix it. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Today's day 224, so if you're following along at home and you pre-ordered the game on handmadehero.org, you can download the source code and follow along by using day 223 source code. That's the source code that I'm starting with here. So let me just try and see if I can point out what the bug actually is. And I mean, bug is a tough term to use here because it suggests that something's not working properly when actually everything's working properly. So I guess what I really mean is objectionable artifact, something that we would like to get rid of if we can, right? So it's not really that the code is broken, but it's that the code isn't as good as it should be, right? And so here's what happens. When we switch from this scene to the next scene, what I'd like you to do is pay close attention to what happens right at the transition point. And I talked about this on yesterday's Q&A, but just for those of you who didn't see that. What you'll see is there's a brief kind of flash, right? It doesn't just like cut cleanly from one to the other. And so the question is like, what's going on there, right? And what's going on there is we, again, use an on-demand paged asset system. So what happens is we dynamically load everything in the background off the hard drive, and especially on this machine, this is a 7200 RPM hard drive. That's going to be kind of slow, although it's probably mostly in the cache at this point. But either way, point being, it's kind of slow to page those things in. It's at least going to take a frame or two of latency for the asset system's threads to go grab those other images off of the hard drive and put them into memory where we can draw from them, right? And so what we want to do is we want to try and solve that sort of glitchy problem so that we don't get any errors in there. And like one way to solve this obviously is just to have a big old loading screen you slap in front of everything, and you just do this whole loading thing, and you waste a bunch of memory potentially, and blah blah blah. But we don't want to do that. No loading screens on Handmade Hero, preferably. We want everything to be instant. As soon as the user clicks it, it's good to go, right? That's our preference. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to have an alternative to that. Okay, so let's start by talking about like what that problem actually is in practice here, right? So here we go. I'm going to try and sort of show you. In fact, you know what? The best place to do this is probably in the debugger, right? So let's just take a look, because this will happen even the very first time we do render cutscene. And so here's the problem, right? We come into the first time we do rendered cutscene, and we have rendered layered scene there, so you can see it. And if I step into rendered layered scene, we're going to go through each layer index, we're going to pull them out, and then we're going to see in each one of these, we're going to see what that bitmap actually is. And you can see that we get back the bitmap ID here, and that's all working properly because that's all stuff that happens just using sort of the if you want to, I don't know if the directory is the right term, but basically the database, the data table for our asset system, which can instantly answer these queries. So we ask and we instantly get back, oh, that's asset 251 that you were looking for. So then we go to render with asset 251, right? And of course we got to pack up some floats, some vectors there. And so we come in here and we call getBitmap with that ID. Now getBitmap, of course, is just going to ask the asset loader for that thing. It comes in here, and as you can see, it immediately fails to actually get it because it's not there, right? It hasn't been loaded yet. That asset state is not set, right? And you can see, if we look at the state here, the state's set to 0. So it's like, oh, okay, that's not good because we can't actually get it. Now it'll go ahead and say, oh, that's okay. I'll issue a command to load that bitmap, so the bitmap will get loaded, right? But what that means is now when this frame goes off to render, it's just missing that bitmap. And that's the entirety of the problem right there. It's just that when we ask for the bitmap, it's like, okay, thanks for telling me, I gotta go load that. That frame, even if we're able to have like a really short turnaround from the drive, that frame is gonna finish rendering before the drive ever gets back to us with that data, right? That's just, and even if it got back sooner, we've already made the decision that it's not there and we're already not gonna render it, right? So we basically have to solve that problem. So what I wanna do to solve that problem is very simple. It's called a prefetch. What I want to do is I want to give the asset system a little bit of extra time, because especially in a cutscene, there's really no excuse for not doing so, because we know exactly what assets are going to get used in the cutscene, and we know exactly when they're going to get used. So there's really no excuse for us not sort of like announcing, if you will, to the asset system, hey man, here's what you're going to need very shortly. Get those loads in flight for me, please, right? And that's really, I think, all we'll probably have to do. The first thing that I want to do, though, is I'd like to get this playing back at an artificially fast rate, just so we can see it happen a little more clearly, okay? So here is us advancing the cutscene at a much more rapid rate than we would have otherwise, right? So here's us zipping through the cutscene, right? And you can see that blinking happening at various times there, right? So that's all nice and good. And, you can see that kind of little flicker. And so what we want to do is get rid of that little flicker, okay? So to get rid of that little flicker, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this prefetch? Well, if you'll notice, we kind of have a nice thing here where we can just go through and say, oh, here, render this cutscene. And we give it a cutscene time, and it does some stuff, right? And the entirety of this routine is actually very simple. There's not a lot to it. It's all pretty easy. There's not, there really isn't a whole lot that needs to happen there. And so what I could do, right, is I could just render the cutscene twice if I wanted to. And basically the first one that, the one that we're actually going to render can be at the current time, but then it's pretty free for me to just render another cutscene at a future time. And instead of ever actually asking it to commit those bitmaps, I could just throw it away after that, right? Because basically, remember, we do the render group stuff. We build up a render list, and then we ask it to render it. During that build-up process is when all those load queues happen. If at the end, instead, I just said throw it away, then we would get a pre-caching for free, right? So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm just going to create a thing here that's like sort of a subset of this function. And maybe I won't call this pretty stupid anymore, but I'll say like cutscene complete, for example, like so, right? And so what I'm going to do is just say, all right, let's move this part out here. And there we go. Maybe I'll return that. And I'm going to do like render cutscene, at time or something like this. I don't know what I'm going to call it. It's basically just an internal function to the cutscene system that no one else really needs to call. So the name of it's not too sensitive. It's not going to leak out into anything, hopefully. And so then we'll just have exactly this function, essentially the exact same function, right? That's just render cutscene. Oops. At time. Okay? And that's it. So once we've got that set, and I'm going to go ahead and return that from here, cutscene complete. Now we're just going to take it so that it just takes an R32 there. It doesn't take a pointer anymore because this one's not supposed to modify that value. So now we just have a way of rendering cutscenes at times. We could do that multiple times if we want to. We can do as many as we want. And so if we do something like that, now we have the option, oops, gotta dereference that. Now we have the option of potentially doing it twice, right? So this is the one that actually renders the cutscene. It's free for me to do another one here where I just say, oh, let's go ahead and look maybe like a half second into the future, or maybe a whole second into the future, right? And then we can render 2 whole cutscenes. Now the problem with this, if I was to just do it, this would solve our problem. But the problem with this right here is it would actually save all of those drawing commands, right? And we don't actually want it to do that. So we have two choices. We can either call the prefetch directly if we wanted to, meaning in rendered layered scene, right here where we do this push bitmap, we could choose to actually have that actually switch to calling prefetch, right? That's totally valid thing to do. We could do that, or the other thing we can do, like I said, is just have a stream and throw it away. And so I'm not sure which one of those would be the easier one to do. Here's the trick I'm going to try right now. I don't know if this is a particularly good idea, but let's try it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass 0 as my render group, right? And what I'm going to do here is anywhere that the render group gets used, which is just like inside the perspective statement there, I'm going to try just saying, oh, okay, well, let's just only say, you know, if we were going to do, you know, sort of this render group stuff, right? So I'll just do if render group. Then we do this stuff. Otherwise, we will only ever, and in fact, I can do this up here as well, right? If we didn't have a render group, we'll just do a prefetch. Now, I don't know if I love this idea, but it does mean that we don't waste any memory, like, you know, building up the list that we're going to throw away. So again, like I said, I don't really know if I like that or not, but I'm just going to try that at first because it seems like the easiest thing to do. So I'm going to try that first and see if I like that. So there we go. That's really it. That's the entirety of it. And so now all we're doing is we're calling the exact same function twice, one with a slight look ahead, right? About a second of look ahead. And when we do that render cutscene at time, it's going to check to see if the render group was set to 0. And if the render group is set to 0, it knows that it's not really rendering. It's actually just prefetching, right? And so now let's see how that works and see if that gets rid of our glitchy, right? And it does. You'll notice there's no glitching anymore on any of these scene transitions, right? They're all just totally set, and that's because now we've given the streaming system enough time to catch up. Although I did see one there right at the beginning one. And there's a very good reason for that one as well. And we should talk about that because we do want to fix that one. Although we don't care about looping since we're never going to loop the cutscene, we do care about it for a slightly separate reason. So first let me ask, do you guys know why there's one on the beginning one, right? And, you know, if you think about it, you should be able to figure out why we have none on anywhere except that beginning one. So think about that for a second. 1, 2, 3. Okay, time's up. The reason is because when we are looking ahead, we don't wrap. So when we get to the end of the cutscene, it's not going to go back to the first one. Because remember, the code that makes it loop around is right here. And that doesn't ever happen inside render cutscene at time, right? So it never asks for that. You know, when it's rendering the last cutscene, it never looks ahead into the first cutscene. But that's actually okay because normally we would not be looping it. So we really don't have to fix that problem. But the problem that we do want to fix is this right here. That first time it comes up, we would rather not have that happen, right? And so I think what we want to do there is because if this is the very first thing you see in the game, there's nothing we can look ahead from. We're just starting up. We got to start rendering. So typically what I do, because the streaming system's always trying to run a little ahead of everything else. But at the very start of the program, there's no way it could be ahead. So what I usually do is basically like the loading screen that I have, if you will, is just to give it maybe just like 100 milliseconds or 200 milliseconds of black, right? Just like a quick little black screen on boot so that it has enough time to be loading ahead, right? And so what I would say here is just say, oh, okay, we would just do something like this, where it'd just be like, there's nothing in this scene at all. Like, at all. Think there's a none? Is there a none? Yeah. So there's absolutely nothing in it, and there's no actual, like, anything, right? It's just a bunch of 0, right? Something like that. And so now we could have this thing have a duration. So we could say, oh, when we do our asset, none and all this sort of thing. So it's 0, 0, 0, and then we would put a duration here, right? if we wanted to, we could have like a big old delay in there somewhere, right? Wait a minute. Is that the right one for it? Asset opening cutscene is asset none. Then we have index. Then we have array count. Then we have intro layers. Yeah. So I think that would be correct. Let me see if I can put a big old delay in there just so I can make sure it's actually there. Oh. Right. We're never using that one. There we go. So now there should be a delay in there, right? So perfect. We now have a delay in there, and so now all we need to do is make sure that we have enough of a delay so that it can load things, which it should be reasonably good with, I think. But we don't really know like how long the loading time actually is for our assets, if that makes sense. So let's take a look at what that would actually have to be. I'm going to turn it back now so that it doesn't do sort of the blitz thing, if that makes sense. Let's see here. Let us see here. If I can manage to search for it. There we go. So if we're back to our normal time, then this would of course be 20 seconds would of course be too long. So we'll see. I don't know, for slow artists, even just 1 second, which seems like a long time, right? That didn't seem like 1 second to me, but I guess it was. So now we don't get that blink at the startup because we've given the streaming system enough time to load everything in, which is what we wanted. And yeah, that might take some tuning. We could also do something where we wait intentionally to make sure that everything's loaded. But again, that's not necessarily, we don't really probably have to do that. We could wait a little bit longer because I don't know why it seems so fast. It might be that it's just because it takes a while to get everything started up, but it's like before I can even maximize the darn thing, off it goes. I wonder, do we have a way to start up in full screen mode? I don't remember if we do or not. I might enjoy that for the moment. Let's see here, toggle full screen. Let's see, toggle full screen. All right, so if I wanted to do that, I suppose after we did our create window, I could toggle full screen on it, right? If I wanted to, so I could do it like right here. There we go. So yeah, so there's a little cruftiness in that. There's that white sort of annoying thing there that we see when we boot up, and that's probably something it would be nice to get rid of as well. Maybe we could do that today. But now we've got it so that now once it starts playing the cutscenes, there's none of those little glitches, right? And especially when it's playing at sort of a nice leisurely pace here, then you know that you're not going to get any, the streaming system's got a full second or whatever our look ahead time is, right, to take care of that. And maybe a second isn't as much as we should give it, because we could give it a lot more than that, right? We could give it significantly more than that. We could say something like, cutscene warm-up time, right? And we could say that that's, or warm-up seconds or something like that. And then we could just use that in both places. We could say, well, we'll show nothing for a certain amount of that, and then we'll look ahead by that amount as well. So now we know we always have like sort of a prefetch cursor and a regular cursor kind of running through it, right? And hey, that's going to bug me. So I'm going to go ahead and say, let's just get rid of that annoying thing too. So there's two things that we have to do. The first one is for our render group. I don't know that our render group ever gets actually cleared. I don't know that there's a clear in our thing. There might be, I'm not sure, but if we do begin render, yeah, I don't think there is. So what we want to do is we're going to need a thing where we clear the render group. Now normally we won't have to clear it, because normally when we're rendering the scene, we don't the layers themselves like clear it, right? In other words, we draw the whole screen so we don't have to worry. But what would happen is if there are no layers, if it's a layer count of 0, then we have a problem, right? So what we would want to do is say, like, if the scene layer count equals 0, then we would want to make sure we issue a clear. And I'm going to go ahead and see, just leave it gray so we can see that it's actually doing it. So there we go, right? And so that's nice because then we can make sure that we're actually clearing to black during our blackout startup period. And that way everything's nice and clean. So there we go. And it kind of starts the thing and it'll go from there. Okay. And so now what I want to do is I want to get rid of I don't like that flicker, that white flicker. So I need to drop back to the Win32 platform layer and figure out why that's happening, right? Now in our WM Paint, we do this Win32 display buffer in window thing, right? You can kind of see what happens here. That does this kind of stretch GI bits thing. And I worry that we never initialize that buffer. I don't know if that's the case, but I suspect we don't. In fact, you can kind of see, oh, hey, look at that. Probably clear this to black. Yeah, probably, right? And so what we want to do there is when we call that Win32 resize div section, we want to make sure that we get rid of all of it so that it's all cleared to 0, right? And so, I think there's a 0 memory call in Windows. I want to say there is. I don't really remember. But I think so. Oh, it might use the C runtime library though. I'm not sure. Yeah, runtime library 0 memory macro. What's fill memory? Wait. When we virtual alloc though, can't we ask it to give us back something that's cleared to 0? Isn't there just a way to automatically say, hey, 0 that for me? I thought there was. Let's find out. Allocation type. Physical. I don't know. 0. Let's see. Reserve commits or changes. Memory allocated by this function is automatically initialized to 0. So that all should have been 0, apparently, right? So in theory, we should never actually have to clear it to black. It should already be black, right? So I'm just going to say, note, KC virtual alloc should only have given us back zeroed memory, which is all black. So we don't need to clear it, right? And then I'm just going to check. I'm going to check to see if that's actually the case, because I don't know that I necessarily trust MSDN all the time. It can be wrong. It's definitely been wrong before. Oops. All right. So I'm going to come in through here and make sure that buffer memory looks like what we expect it to look like. Here is the memory window. I'm going to probably move that up here for now. So let's take a look at what buffer memory is, first of all. So there it is, and I'm going to paste it in here just to see. That looks pretty zeroed to me. I'll give you that. That looks very zero. I don't see a lot of non-zero values in there, so I'll give you that. That's pretty zeroed. So the question now is, why are we getting that white, that sort of white nastiness in there, right? So we got to figure out why that's actually happening. So when we do toggle full screen, there's a couple of things that could be happening. First of all, I want to look at our window class, because sometimes in a window class, you might end up with an H brush that does something that you don't expect it to do. It looks like we're setting our H brush like H redraw CS, H redraw CS, V redraw. I wonder if we really want those as well. Like, I don't really know exactly what we want here, because we don't really want we want our window to just draw black when it does anything like that. So I guess the other thing we could do is initialize it with a black brush so that it always did that for us whenever it repainted the window. I really don't know. This is one of those ones where you kind of want Raymond Chen just say, what's the simplest set of things we can do to make sure it stays black and never draws anything else, right? And it's hard to know because we can't step through it. We can't step through their code and see. So HBR background, right, is one example, and this is a handle to the class background brush. So we could, for example, make a brush that was just all black, right? And set that and see if that helped at all. So let's see if that helps at all. If we do HBR background, let's see. If we do HBR background, we would need like, I don't know how I do an RGB brush. RGB brush, I forget all this stuff. It's been a long time. But if I want to handle to a brush that's just RGB, how do I do this again? Let's see here. Create pen, set BK color, set rect. Set BK color is not really what I wanted. I wanted an actual brush. I think get stock objects would give one to me now that I think about it. This is just my memory of Windows kind of coming back kind of slowly. There it is. So that's what I actually just want, is get stock object black brush. So we should be able to say, okay, here's a black brush to use. Have fun with that. Trust me, it's an H brush. You know, Windows, don't worry about it. Let's see if that helps. Hey, look. Perfect. So now we got rid of that kind of annoying white thing there. That was kind of, I assume that was just Windows either not clearing anything or clearing us to white because it thought that's what it should do for some reason. I'm not sure. But now we have a really nice startup experience. The user pushes run, and it's pretty good there. There's still, occasionally I'll see a little bit of a window wipe there, which doesn't thrill me. And I'm not sure. I'm going to do something more like this. I might create the window without it being visible first so that you can't see it. And then we'll create it visible, we'll make it visible later. And so I don't know if any of these set WS visible. I don't think they do. So when we do a toggle full screen, we'll then here do show window SW show. I think that's the right command for it. To like, instead of having it come up as visible with the use default stuff, I'm going to first let it go full screen, then show it so that you don't see any flashing. So that's way better than it was. All right, so that feels pretty good to me. I think that's doable. So I'm pretty happy with that. All right, so it's 5:30 now. We still have another half an hour. So we've got our cutscene playing pretty nicely here. I think the next thing that we want to do, there's kind of you know, two directions here. So one thing that we would want to do to finish this cutscene is we'd want to sync it to an intro soundtrack, but we don't have an intro soundtrack yet. So that's why we're not going to go do that, because that'd be, you know, we fix the Win32 timing code to be nice and consistent. And then we would go ahead and sync it to some kind of a time, you know, sort of go line it up to where in the sound we wanted each sort of cut to occur and how long we wanted each sort of zoom thing to take, right? But we can't do that. So the other thing that I think we should probably do is just pop back to the game code now and start to sort of structure our game code in order to have an intro cutscene, right? Because really we're going to need some way of having the intro cutscene play and the gameplay and that sort of stuff. So we need some kind of a piece of code, you know, something that sits there and can be logical about what it is we're doing. Are we playing the cutscene? Are we playing the game? Are we doing, you know, are we in some kind of a selection screen? You know, who knows what's happening, right? So let's go ahead and look at that. And that seems like the most productive use of the half hour, since we can't really sync to a timeline since we don't really have one yet. Now, there's not much to that. Like I said, it's pretty straightforward because we set up everything in our Handmade cutscenes thing to work that way. So, you know, if just to give you an idea of what we would do, it's really simple. All we'd be doing is tuning these durations so that instead of each thing taking 20 seconds, it takes however long we actually want it to take, right? You know, once we sort of take a look at how long the intro track is and where we think the breaks would naturally go, we would just literally set these values, and then we could play the cutscene and the music at the same time, and we would probably be good to go right from there. because again, we don't have anything here that has to be like super sample accurate. This isn't like a beat matching game or anything. So we only care, and there isn't lip syncing either, right? It's just still images. So we don't even really have a whole lot of precision concerns. So even anywhere close is actually fine. So it's pretty easy for us to just tune those values, and that's probably all we really need to do, right? Okay, so let's take a look back at handmade.cpp. And so what I want to do here, I guess, is I want to just start sort of thinking about how we deal with the game itself and the fact that this is going to be an attract mode thing, and then somebody at some point starts playing the game, right? And we already sort of have that concept, because if you remember, if I switch this around, right? If I switch this back so that instead of the cutscene, we're actually doing the game itself, we already sort of had this concept, right? Here's our screen. Here's our hero screen, our first, dummy screen or whatever. And the hero's not on it yet, right? And the hero, in fact, doesn't show up until I actually push a key to sort of say that, hey, I'm playing a hero now, right? And the reason we did that, I don't have a controller right here, but way back when, it's because you can have multiple heroes in the game, right? And that's not, the game's not really supposed to be multiplayer, but we want to make sure the code supports multiplayer, just so I can show how you make sure you can do that relatively cleanly, right? And so what we have there is we have already the concept that the game gets started, right? On that, when you push that space bar, the game gets started. And so what I want to do is I want to sort of turn from having it show this empty screen to perhaps showing that, like, let that cutscene until you start the game. That seems like a way better. Idea to me, right? Yeah, that seems like a good thing. And that'll also inform how we want to do our what's the word I'm looking for? That can also inform how we might want to do our pinging, like our prefetch from the outside, because that may have ramifications for like how we say, oh hey, start prefetching assets or whatever, right? So let's see. Ooh, bit of yawning going on. That is true. It's a bit yawny. So what I want to do here is I want to be able to switch between these two. And so what I think I might do is say, okay, this needs to be a dynamic variable for start, right? So it's playing the cutscene or doing whatever, but we need some way of testing it. Now what I could do is say, are there any heroes in the game? You know what I mean? And we have a thing that's like controlled heroes, right? And we loop over it too, and we say, like, for each controlled hero, we actually see, is there an entity index for this thing or whatever? So we could even do a thing that's like heroes exist or something, right? And we could say that if we find one of these ones, then the hero does, in fact, exist, right? So we could say something like, oh, hero exists equals true if that happens, right? And so if we did that, then we could just say, oh, heroes exist is the thing that we switch on. And so then we'd start off, or not, because actually you have to make sure that your cases go in the right order. That's good. Let's try again. Then we start off playing the cutscene, right? And it'll just keep playing the cutscene until eventually we join the game. And then once we join the game, we're in the game, right? Now you can see that we've got sort of another like issue that we'd probably have to address. This is probably not the right time to address it because the game itself, you'd want to do this a little later on when the game itself is kind of more of a complete game, like when you're more like walking around fighting some enemies, doing a few more things where you actually have that structure kind of more in place rather than just a little test thing. But the idea there is just that, hey, you need to prefetch the assets for the game as well, because as you can see, we're in here and we're kind of doing our thing. And then as soon as I hit the key, it switches and you're playing, but the assets may not have loaded yet, so you see like a partial screen or whatever. So that's another thing that we would want to do, but I don't really want to mess with that yet. I wanted to make sure it was done for the cutscenes because there's no reason not to do it for the cutscenes, but I don't want to do it for the game necessarily. Okay, so now that we've got the cutscene working and we can start and join, now we've kind of got to start. We've got to sort of think about a few more things, like how we want to deal with some other aspects of what's going on, right? And the reason for that is once I'm in a game, I can't necessarily get out of a game. Like I can't hit escape or something and go back. Like I can't quit, right? I can't exit or anything. So we may want to actually have a way to like exit Handmade Hero, start to think about that a little bit. And I don't know how we want to do that exactly. But one example would be like we have the concept of a back button. I don't know if the back button, let me see where that was. Back button. What do we set that to keyboard-wise? I don't know. Arrow back. So it is set to escape. So what we could do is when you hit the back button, you just go back. You can just exit out of the game that way, right? Let's see about something like that. So if we wanted to do that, what we would do is we would, I guess our entity system, you can kind of see when we do our add player here, right? We have no real way of undoing any of that. It'd be nice to maybe start to fix that a little bit. So let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can do there. So if I'm going through my controllers here and I hit the escape key, I'm going to make it so that that just straight up gets rid of the player entirely, right? So if the controller back ended down, I'm going to say that the con hero entity index equals 0, and I'd like to be able to delete this entity, right? I'd like to be able to like delete low entity. Do we have such a thing? I don't even know. Because we haven't really worked very much on that part of the game. So we've got get low entity, we have like add player. I don't know what that actually does. It says it does add grounded entity, right? And so do we have delete entity anywhere? Do we have delete low entity anywhere? So we don't have any way to remove entities. Would that be a fair assessment? It appears that that would be a fair assessment. So we would want to have a way to delete entities to be sure, right? I mean, at least I assume we do. One way of doing it would be to not ever really do that and to just like kind of cycle them. But so how does that actually work here? So we just add entities to the state incrementally over time. So really just a simple free list like we've been using everywhere else would be totally fine here. So instead of allocating a new one every time, it could just go ahead and keep a free list. That seems pretty reasonable to me. Yeah. So let's go ahead and do that. For the time being, and we'll just say, okay, there's an index, right, of that thing. And in there, we will do a little like to do, actually delete or something like this, and we'll be fine. Okay. So in theory, we're calling it, oh, and I got to pass the game state to that as well. Okay, so now in theory, if I create one of these guys and I walk him around, I should be able to kill him and go back to the cutscene, right? And then I should be able to like create him again and go. And you can see that he's not actually deleted, right? There he is. Yeah, so, proof that he's still in the world. And so I can keep doing this as much as I want and make more and more heroes. Of course, they're all like stuck in each other's collision boxes right now because they're spawning right on top of each other, which is not a very good thing. But you get the idea. So we're all good there, I think. So now I should probably just implement that. Although the thing that I want to do before I implement that is maybe say something like, if you were to try and exit the game, so if you were to say this, where this thing ended down, then maybe we exit the game, right? So, like quit requested, like this. And then if no heroes exist and the quit was requested, then we would say like, hey, that's it, for the game's over, right? Stop. And so I don't really know how we want to signal quitting. I assume that what we'd want to do is have that be in something that we pass back to the game, to the platform code, because this is the thing that needs to do shutdown, right? And so in order for that to work, we would need to do a thing where we would need to do a thing where inside the code here, there was something it could look at, right? So in the Word32 platform section, when we're doing sort of our thing, we've got global running. And you can kind of see that global running is set by some platform stuff, so we can hit Alt F4 to like kill the game or whatever, and that's all good. But we don't really have any way of sort of having the game do the quit. You know what I mean? So what we want to do, I think, is we want to go ahead and grab that from the game itself. So we want to do something where in here, as we're sort of going through whatever's happening, at the end, or rather after we do update and render, let's go ahead and get update and render. Oops. After we call game update and render, I think what we want to do is say that global running, is going to get set to false if the game indicates to us that that should happen. So maybe we do something like this, where we say, oh, if there was a quit requested, then we'll go ahead and do that. Now, I would probably do that here, and I'd say, like, okay, if the heroes exist, if no heroes exist, then if a quit was requested, then I'll just say, like, memory quit requested equals true, and that'll end the game, right? I could do it, like, right here, even. Something like that. And so that's just a way of exiting out. That means we will need some, excuse me, in the platform layer, we'll need some way that it can sort of signal that back. And this is like note Casey signals back to the platform layer. And so that would be B32 quit requested. And that should be fine, I think, right? Now I'm going to take a look in Win32 Handmade. I just want to make sure that when we initialize game memory, that we initialize the whole thing to 0. And I don't know if we do. We do. So there we go. So now I should be able to, if I'm watching the cutscene, I should be able to quit the game. I can. I should be able to go in here. I should be able to go back. Ooh. That quit the game even though heroes existed. Why is that? Why? Oh, I see why. We never give it a chance to reset the escape key. So it's kind of like on the first frame it goes, oh, I should kill this hero. On the second frame, right, it exits out of the menu entirely. So that's a key that's going to have to be debounced, right? Meaning like, or that we have to check for it going down and up again, right? And so, yeah, I feel like we would need to do more of a, I guess we could do a was pressed. That would probably be fine. Let's take a look here. Oops. So we could probably just do this, right? We could say was pressed that, like so, and was pressed, and that may be it. So there's regular exit, there's two-step exit, and then we're good. So at least now we can like get into the game, we can get out of the game, and that gives us a little bit more of a sort of a solid thing happening there. But of course, we also don't really have any logic for our cutscene. So what we want to do now is, I think, probably have a little bit more of a formal idea of what's happening with the cutscenes. They probably shouldn't have, something where it's just this random thing in the middle of game state that's like, oh, what's the cutscene, right? So I think we want to try and make the cutscene a little bit more of a thing, so that we kind of have a little bit more of an idea of what it's doing and how and whatever, right? So I'm going to do a thing here where I just say, okay, there's such a thing as a playing cutscene. And that's going to have to encompass all of the information that needs to be encompassed by a playing cutscene. And of course, that's for right now not going to be particularly interesting. But, you know, that at least gives us a place to put other things should we decide that we need to do that, right? And it's true that we probably will want a little bit more information in there, because right now, actually, this stuff is hard-coded as well, meaning the shot index and all that stuff. So we could also do another thing where we said, okay, there's also, you know, which one of these it is. So, you know, a playing cutscene could also have something like this. What are the scenes, right? And how many are there? Then here's the T in it so far. So that seems a little bit more reasonable. Yeah. So what I'd like to do is then say, okay, you know, we've got playing cutscene, and playing cutscene maybe is a thing that can be returned. So maybe we'll do something like play intro cutscene, or rather get intro initialize. I don't know, what do I want to call this? Maybe just begin intro cutscene, or that suggests there's going to be an end. Make intro cutscene? Not sure. Right, so if I do make intro cutscene, then what I can do is just say, like, all this information that was there, I'm going to bake into it. So I say, here's a playing cutscene. That's the result. And I'm going to go ahead and initialize it. So we say, okay, the scene count is this, this count. Scenes come from here. The T is just 0.0, though we don't need to initialize that because that'll happen automatically with this. And then I'm going to return that. So there you go. So that'll make the intro cutscene. I don't need to pass anything to it. Really, there's nothing to pass. And so now I could actually, when we start up the game, have a little bit more of a concrete thing that says which one of these things we're playing at the moment. Yeah? Yeah. All right, so if I do that, let's go ahead and now change render cutscene. Instead of taking t cutscene, I'm going to pass in which cutscene we're talking about. And now this will be like cutscene t, right? It'll look more like that. It'll do... Actually, no, that's not true. It'll just pass that straight on in, won't it? So we'll do render cutscene at time. We'll actually take... Yeah, we'll actually take both of those. And so anyway, this will actually need to be past the actual cutscene itself. So let's go ahead and do that. I don't know how I don't know where I want that passed. Do I want it at the end? I don't know. Let's put it there. It's fine. Don't worry about it. All right. So yeah, playing cutscene comes in here. When we get it passed in, we're going to go ahead and use the things that are in that. And here. And now we should be good to go. We just have to do a little bit of cleanup work. So we're passing the cutscene. Of course, I always spell it differently because that's just the way I am. So render cutscene at time needs to take cutscene t cutscene, not at the beginning, like so. And then this, of course, would be cutscene. Oops. Cutscene t. And there we go. All right. So you're right. It doesn't have. There we go. So that seems good. That all seems good. And t cutscene is not a member of game state. That's correct now. So now what I want to do is where we used to have t cutscene, I'm just going to have playing cutscene and the current cutscene. Like so. So now what I'll do is when we do render cutscene, I'm just going to say, oh, hey, this is the current cutscene. And what I want to do now is just to initialize that, right? When we have not been initialized yet, then what I'm going to do is say, oh, hey, yeah, when we initialize the game, I'm going to need you to make that be an intro cutscene, right? Like so. Before identify current cutscene, missing type specifier int assumed. No, C++ does not support default int. Yes, well, you know, I mean, what do you want from me? I didn't define it because it was in here, and, you know, I just didn't have the chance. So there you go. You know, no need to worry. No need to freak out, compiler. All right, so we're going to do render cutscene here. This is just game state current cutscene, like so. T cutscene not a member of game state. That's unfortunate, of course, but not really a problem because we can just do like advanced cutscene, I guess, with something like this. Now, there is a nastiness here. There is a thing that's kind of annoying. And that is by doing it this way, we do kind of make it a little harder on ourselves because these are not going to be hot loadable anymore because they might move, if that makes sense. So that's kind of annoying. And I don't know if we want to do anything to try and fix that. We don't really have to because we can always make them be in the function themselves. So there's ways we can get around that, but it's worth noting that that may cause us a bit of a problem in the future, and we'll have to see about it just in terms of the hot loading of the code. Now, since we baked it, it's not clear that that's going to matter too much because we're not going to be probably fussing with it as much, but it's worth noting that is a little bit of a problem. And so that's just a limitation of the fact that we don't get much support from C for our hot loading, so we can't have stuff like the data get munged properly. It's just a bummer, but that's the the reality of it. So anyway, so then we just need a way to like advance cutscenes in time, right? Again, just I had hard coded this, but now just making it a little more formal so that we kind of can have multiple cutscenes if we want to, and they're not all kind of baked in. So here's cutscene, here's DT. So cutscene T plus equals DT is all that's going to do, nothing at this point. And now we should be back to normal, right? So now again we can go in, we can come back out, and of course what's going to be problematic here is when we go into the game like that and come back out, the cutscene won't restart. And presumably we probably wanted it to. We probably will want like a little title screen at some point, and we'll probably want to restart the cutscene, like so we show the title screen for a couple seconds and then we start the cutscene or something like that. I don't know exactly what we want to do, but it'd be something like that. But right now, what'll happen is instead, if we let this go, right, like I wait for a little while, you can kind of see the welcome sign, right, kind of flowing off to the right there. It's now almost entirely gone as it kind of comes around. So if I go into the game and now come back, you can see that's where we start again, right? So we don't really want that. We want the ability to restart instead of it sort of saving that state, because presumably that's what we would want to have happen. And so in order to do that, what we'll need to do... Oh, wait, did we break? No, we didn't. I just want to make sure Alt F4 still worked. Let me verify. Yeah. So what we want to do is we want to be able to restart the cutscene whenever we, kind of come back. Whenever we start the game, we want to make sure we reset that cutscene, right? And so in order to do that, we need some notion of like when we transition. And so that's the problem. Like, this is a very clean way to do it because it means that there's never really going to be any kind of conflict about, there's never really going to be any issue with accidentally, thinking that it's in the game and it's not, or thinking that there's heroes when they're not. But we don't really have any way of knowing that we transitioned from a state of playing cutscenes to a state of not playing cutscenes. And so that's the next thing we should do, but at this point we're at the 5-minute warning, so I don't want to start in on that yet. Since I got to go a little early tonight anyway, I feel like what I would rather do is just go to the Q&A now so that we can get any questions that there might be, and then we can start on some of that stuff tomorrow. So let me go ahead and move it to Q&A. There we go. Insofar as would adding a block until loaded style function be a good idea to make sure even slower computers have all the layers loaded before the scene starts? Yeah, potentially. It depends what you want to optimize for, right? And we already have one, so if we want to do that, there actually is one of those. It is, where is it? Handmade render group. It's this right here. So if you wanted to, for example, like what we could do, in fact, we could do this right now, is let me just to show you how that's done, and we could do it. We could leave it this way. It's not a bad idea to just do. So if we do it like this, right? And we don't have any glitches because we're doing our prefetches. Yay for us, right? Well, if we were to turn off the prefetches to simulate like a super slow computer or something, right? So if we turned off the prefetch, which is here, we'd be back to glitchland, right? So now we see those glitches happening, you know? If we wanted to turn those glitches into pauses, what we could do instead is just not render anytime we sense that there aren't any of those, that there aren't any assets, that there are any assets missing, I guess what I'm trying to say. And the way that we would do that, right, is we'd just say like, oh, okay, you know, in here, when we do tiled render group to output, we could instead do like, okay, just take a look and say if all assets present, right, then do the render, otherwise don't. And so now what it would do is it'd go like, oh, okay, well, you know, now there's a little like hiccup each time, but it's really brief, right? And so that's totally, you know, a fine thing to leave in there, and maybe that's what we want, right? And then you can also see, like when I do, for example, if I do spacebar, you can kind of see that with the exception of our ground tiles, which page in as a separate thing, and that's kind of a different issue, when we hit that spacebar, that thing also will just wait until it's ready as well. So we can totally do that. That's an easy thing to do, and probably it can't hurt, right? Probably. So we could just leave that in there, and then once we put, you know, our prefetch back in, then there's no hiccups. And if you should have if you know, for some reason it did fall behind, it'd be okay. You know, that'd be okay. So yeah. I'm going to go ahead and take out that times 10. Isn't there a way to clear the back buffer using SIMD? Yes, although it is not necessarily faster. You have to test it to see. Rep instructions are often quite fast, and so I don't know what we're using at the moment, but SIMD is not always the fastest way to clear, if I remember correctly, but sometimes it is. Since in that case, we really don't have to worry because clearing, we only do it in the case where we don't render anything. We don't really have to care how slow the clear is at the moment, and probably we never will have to care, would be my guess. Will there be any animated cutscenes or just zooming shots? Just zooming shots unless you count the like 2 frame for the Santa putting the hat on. Can you do a clock? Sure. $15,364. Would it be possible to fade from the desktop to the game's initial black screen? Yeah, you can if you want to. I'm not a fan of fade to black. I don't really like fades so much unless you are trying to do them for a very specific reason. If you watch a movie, there are very few fades. They're only employed in very specific, like fades and wipes are used very sparing in any modern cinematography, right? You think a wipe, you start to think of like 1970, right? And so fades, are definitely still employed. Wipes wipes less so, but fades are still employed for certain emotional effects. But in this case, it's not necessarily one that it's not probably what I would expect. A fade in, maybe. I don't know if I would want to fade in or not, but in terms of can you do it, if you do want that effect, you could. And the way that you do that is you would try to get the contents of the desktop background, or you'd put up a layered window first and let it fade out. And, yeah, I don't really know. I mean, let me try and sketch the idea out for you, I guess, because it's not super easy to explain. But I can try to kind of give you what the idea is. And don't do it exactly the way I'm doing it here. But, so if I were to do fade out right here and make a thing here that's just like internal void fade out, then what you would do, right, is you'd take one of these windows and you'd do exactly what we did to the main window. So you'd say, okay, I'm going to make this window, I'm going to make it the size of the whole screen, and off we go. Now I probably also I need that that window class to be something else. So I'm going to have to make one of these here as well. Although I might be able to do it without one. Well, we'll do it anyway, right? All right. So if we have here, here's our thing. Get rid of this and this, and that. So I'm gonna say like, we're gonna fade this thing out. I'm gonna pass my instance in. We don't really strictly need to, but we might as well. You can get it by calling get module handle 0. Pro tip. So anyway, if we do this, we can create a window and show it full screen. What we would do is say, oh, you know what? Give us something that's on, over the whole screen. Might be the easiest way to do it. I'm just trying to think of the one that's be most likely to work most of the time, because there's a lot of different ways you could do this. You could try to capture the thing and draw it in your window, but this might be the one that works the best because it doesn't require you to try and capture, which could be unreliable depending on the operating system, whereas this would probably work from XP forward. I don't know. So I'm just sketching it out here. Your mileage may vary. It's not something I would really recommend shipping in a game for any particular reason, but if you really wanted to do it, here's a way to try. This is what I'm saying. So then, we could just do a thing where we said like, okay, we want to do an update layered window on this thing. So here we go. Here we go. so. And you can see this update layered window function is it's something that allows us to call the operating system and tell it to update this sort of window that's going to be translucent. In fact, it's the thing that we do for this, and I covered it on stream before when we did the thing where we made our window translucent so you could see behind it. I don't know if you remember, we did that. It was a long time ago, like in episode 30 or something. We did it. And so if we wanted to do that here, right, we could do something where we, oh, you know what else we might be able to do? Well, okay, I'm gonna stop talking about it. And I don't know, maybe we even still have update layered window in here. Do we? No, we don't. So again, I would just need to call this, and you can see what we've got here for docs. So we want to pass the window handle that we're trying to update, right, which is this guy. We want to pass a DC here for the screen, and I don't actually know. So if HDC does a handle to a DC for the screen, this handle is obtained by setting null when calling the function. Calling what function? It is used for palette color matching when the window contents are updated. If HDC is null, the default palette will be used, which this is probably all fine. We probably don't need either of those HDCs, I'm guessing. A handle to a DC for the surface that defines the layer window. Can create compatible DC. So we could do both of those as 0 potentially. The new size of the layer window, size not change. We could do null. So all of these we can probably do. With null. I think. Let's see. Yeah. So I think we can do these with null. So let's try that first and we'll see. So I'm just going to pass 0 for this HDC. I'm going to pass 0 for both of these, right? And this, and that. And then I need to do the color key, the P blend, and the DW flags. So the color key, I don't think we care about this. So the code we use when compositing layer, I don't think we care about that because we're not actually going to use it. Because the blend function is going to tell it not to use that, basically. So I'll just put in some random thing here. So there's the color key. Now we need a blend function. Will it blend? And then we need a flags. And so the way we're going to do it is we're going to do ULW alpha, which is telling it to do an alpha composite operation. And I'm sorry I'm kind of flying through this. It's just because this is not really part of Handmade here, obviously. But I'm just going to do alpha level 0, alpha level is less than 255, like alpha level plus plus or something. So we go through all the ranges of it or whatever. And so then we just need to specify how we want to blend our window on top of stuff. You know what I'm saying? So if we do that, we just have to say, okay, blend op, blend flag, source constant alpha format, right? So let's start with the blend op. And then we got to specify the blend flags. Then we got to specify the source constant alpha. And then we got to do the alpha format. Okay, so the blend op, let's see. The only source destination blend operation that has been defined is AC source over. So hey, not like a lot of options there. Blend flags can't be set, so hey, that's great. Specifies an alpha value to use for the entire source bitmap. So this is just going to be our alpha level, right? That we're incrementing over time. Then we have an alpha format, which is controlling the way source messages are interpreted. Alpha format has a value, AC source alpha. Flag set in the alpha channel. Okay, so we don't actually have an alpha channel. I wonder if we can just set this to 0, which means the red, green, blue channels must be pre-multiplied. For example, if the alpha channels. So is that the only one they do? When the alpha format member is AC source alpha, the source bit must be 32 bits. If it is not, the alpha member push will fail. So I'm wondering if we can just set that to 0. I hope so, because we don't actually want it to have any alpha. I don't know if we can or not, though. So this may fail spectacularly. I only got about 5 minutes left before I got to go, so we'll see if we can get it working. Yep. Oh, that's going to loop forever, isn't it? There we go. Okay. Yeah, so fade out. Let's see. So fade out, I'm going to do a sleep. I'm going to do a 1 second sleep here. So we'll start out with 50 and go to 255, and it'll just sleep for 1 second in between cycles. So we'll see if that does anything. So you can see I'm not getting anywhere with that. So I'm not actually seeing my window. So I think I may have to pass more stuff to this. I may not be allowed to do what I did here, unfortunately, which is really too bad because I would have liked it to work, but presumably it didn't. So let's take a quick look. Just here, get last error. See what it didn't like. Okay, so error is 0. That's kind of odd. We should have gotten an error, presumably, right? Because we're not seeing our window show up at all, which is kind of odd, because we know it's there, and we know it's on top. I wondered if we have our SPY++ installed. We do. Right? It's here. Here's our fade out window class. And highlight. I guess let's take a look at it. Yeah, it's the whole screen. So that's all correct. So yeah, I don't know what's wrong with that. Like I said, it may be that you can't pass that many zeros to update layered window and expect it to actually do anything. I was hoping to abuse it so we wouldn't actually have to draw anything, but maybe we do have to. Let's take a look. We have the HDC. Pointer instruction specifies the new screen position layer window. The current position is not changing. It can be null. This can be null. That can be null. This can be null as well. So how does the color, the CR key, get used ever? I'm wondering. Yeah, because we're not using that, so it shouldn't matter what we set that to. So that should all be good. Yeah. So I don't know. We may have to take a look at this sometime when I have a little bit more time, because, like I said, you should be able to do this. It's how this thing works. But you may have to actually update the contents of the window is the problem. And yeah, and I don't actually know how to do that part of it. Now it could be that we just would need to clear it to black. I guess I could get stock object that, but I don't think that's not how these tend to work. This is the thing that gives it the data, and so I suspect that this is not sufficient, if that makes sense. So yeah, so what I could do maybe, yeah, let me take one more look at this to see if there's anything I can quickly do that would give us one of those that would work. That's not useful. Do you have table of contents? Oops, that's not good. Do you have a table of contents that I can look at? Let's just go update layered window. Yeah, I don't know if I want to look at any of these. They might not be what I want. But yeah, so see, you can see here, this is doing like our stuff to create like our DC, like the same way that we were doing it. And then they pass the full thing in. And I know that works, that's how the other thing works. So, well, I mean, I guess it wouldn't be too hard necessarily to do that. I mean, we could, if we wanted to, use our resize div section thing, right? Maybe we could make that work. So something like this. and this would do that for us, I think, right? So we'd say like, oh, okay, create a div section that we could use. And we'd have to do a create compatible DC as well, which I guess I don't know. So that'd be like a client rect, get client rect. So here's our width and height. There we go. So then we'd have a div section which we could draw to if we wanted to. And we could also do a thing where we then created all of our DCs. So the screen DC would just be like get DC 0, I assume. And our DC is just going to have to be compatible DC, right? Yeah, this is going to take too long. There's no way I'm going to be able to finish this in time because I'm already 1 minute over. All right, here's the deal. We will do this on Monday because it's not that hard to do. And we will just do it on Monday. And I'll try to think over the weekend what the easiest way would be to just get it to do black, because I feel like we shouldn't have to create an actual whole DC set up to just put the black window over there and make it fade in. So I'll think about if maybe there's a better way to do that. And if there is, we'll go with it. All right, I'm going to shut it down. Like I said, I got to go. So yeah. Thank you very much for joining me for another episode of Handmade Hero. It's been a pleasure coding with you as always. If you want to follow along the series at home, you can always, you can always go to handmadehero.org and pre-order the game because it comes with the source code, so you can follow along at home. There's also a forum site you can go to if you want to ask questions. There's a Patreon page if you want to support the video series, and a tweet bot, which went down when they shut down our server, but I restarted it, and so in theory it should be tweeting again starting next week. So sorry about that. But I'll check that, yeah. One of these days I'm going to go bother to find where the actual startup script is on that particular server so that when it reboots, it will actually start my tweet bot again. What can you do? All right, so I'll be back here Monday, and you can check that tweet bot, which I will make sure is working again over the weekend if you want to know the schedule, probably 5 again. I'll be back here Monday. Until then, everyone have fun programming, and I'll see you on the internet. Take it easy, everyone.